Academic certificates. Supreme Court dismisses perjury case against President Muhammadu Buhari.
Our contention was that you take the time from the time of publication, because that's when the Form CF001 comes to the notice.
Civil society organizations protest $9.6 billion judgment debt against Nigeria, seek UK government's intervention.
United Nations restates commitment to help fast-track development in Nigeria.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall focus on the task ahead of the new Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development.
Kingsley, in line with the next level agenda, President Muhammadu Buhari expanded the number of ministries from 24 to 27 to enhance service delivery.
Now, one of the newly created ministries is the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development,
which observers believe that the creation of these ministries is apt, considering the upsurge in the cases of disaster, banditry and Boko Haram insurgency, thereby increasing the number of victims requiring assistance and resettlement across the country, including the internally displaced persons.
That's right, Juma. According to the August 2019 report of Doctors Without Borders, about 1.8 million IDPs, that's internally displaced persons, and some 7.1 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance across the northeastern states of Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe.
Indeed, Kingsley, the report also said 230,000 people have fled to the neighboring countries of Niger, Chad, and Cameroon and are requiring repatriation to Nigeria.
Now, a fortnight ago, the minister in charge of this new ministry, that's Sadiya Umar Farouk, flagged off what was termed the voluntary repatriation of 135 out of the more than 60,000 refugees who are in Cameroon back into Adamawa State for resettlement. And the exercise is expected to continue.
Now, how will the ministry hit the ground running? What are the challenges to provide solutions to the plight of millions of IDPs, as well as coordinate humanitarian affairs and social development in the country? What strategy should be employed by the new ministry to assuage the difficulties of victims of both natural and man-made disasters in the country?
Now, another question to ask is whether the policy on IDPs is actually working, or does the ministry need to fashion out a new policy with regard to how to effectively handle the cases of IDPs, and how are the officials at the new ministry likely to be more efficient and effective with regard to the mandate of the new ministry? So those are some of the issues our guests will be taking a look at in our conversation segment on the program today. It's Good Morning Nigeria, as always, live for the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. My name is Kingsley Osadolo. We're broadcasting live, as I said, from our Abuja headquarters studios.
And I am Jummai Yusuf. Thank you for tuning in. As always, we shall bring you the complimentary segments of the program: newspaper review, business, sports, and others to make your morning even more brighter. As usual, we start with the morning news with Usman Aliu. Hello, Usman.
Hello, Jummai. Good morning. Kingsley, good morning. Here is the news. The Supreme Court has dismissed an appeal filed by some individuals claiming President Muhammadu Buhari lied on oath about his academic certificates. This followed the withdrawal of the case by the appellant, since it was filed outside the expected 14 days.
That's really the interesting aspect of this case, because our contention was that you take the time from the time of publication, because that's when the Form CF001 comes to the notice of the public. However, in the CF001 of Mr. President, the stamp of receipt showed 18th. If you take it from 18th October to the time we filed, 15 November, is outside the 14 days.
Increased funding for the judiciary is again on the spotlight as the management of Judicial Service Commission and committees converge on the National Judicial Institute in Abuja. The judicial officers are hoping to come up with strategies that will improve service delivery in the sector.
The backbone of the courts, and going by the nature of your job, a huge burden is placed on your shoulders.
There's nothing been expecting that the more efficiency in the judiciary administrative sector.
A coalition of civil society organizations in Nigeria are asking the UK government to intervene in the $9.6 billion ruling against Nigeria. Leaders of the coalition made the demand during a protest at the British High Commission and the Embassy of Ireland in Abuja.
We demand as follows. 1. The judgment by the commercial court in the UK is set aside, as it is evident that the judgment is ill-motivated and undermines the sovereignty of Nigeria as a nation. Nigerian government and the PID should go back to the position of the arbitration.
The federal government is intensifying efforts towards harmonization of data by various agencies to avoid duplication. This was at a collaborative meeting involving National Identity Management Commission and Joint Admission and Matriculation Board, midwifed by the Bureau of Public Service Reforms.
She has identity anywhere she will stand tall. I'm a Nigerian and present it. And it's a good initiative by the government.
At the end of this ecosystem, we'll make sure that at birth, a child is given the national identification number. When we are formulating policies, we formulate policy for the normal human beings.
The Nigeria Police and other key players in the security sector have worked out an implementable action plan to address insecurity in the Southwest geopolitical zone. Their solution was taken at the second Southwest Security Summit held in Ibadan, Oyo State.
A special operation is underway among the Southwest geopolitical zones. The operation will specifically address the threat of kidnapping and armed robbery on the highways and other localities. The government of the Southwest geopolitical zone will provide the enabling environment to operationalize the security initiatives being made. The number of men that we have is not sufficient to be able to take care of the entire country. We shall all succeed if we join hands with the traditional rulers.
Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, is optimistic that President Muhammadu Buhari will deliver on the mandate given to him by Nigerians, especially in the areas of financial prudence and economic growth. She stated this at a reception in her honor in Kaduna.
We already have a clear policy that we have been implementing in the first term, and Mr. President has directed to conclude the implementation, and we're in the process of revising the plan so that we can grow the economy in a more robust and also a faster manner.
The United Nations is poised to drive accelerated improvement in areas that will help fast-track development in Nigeria. This is part of discussion the Deputy Secretary General of the UN, Amina Mohammed, had with Governor Muhammad Inuwaya in Gombe.
We will begin to look for investments in the economy, those that will look at infrastructure, that will create jobs, that will ensure it's inclusive, that we don't leave anyone behind, so that we can generate the revenues that can pay for basic services, health, education, water and sanitation.
From education to health to upliftment of the youth, especially women and our children, we are facing significant challenges.
And that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Jume. That will be after this break. Stay with us.
back for a minute to the old school. Everybody love me when I do what I do, cause when I come through, I got the power of cool. The power of cool.
Thank you. Thank you. Please, did you hear that?
Of course I did. That is village master tune.
Eh? So Auntie Amebo was not gossiping then?
Village master is celebrating 50 years.
50? Already? This is not a joke. Oh.
It is a national celebration. NTA and village master family are commemorating 50 years.
Hey, please tell me, when is our golden jubilee?
It is from the 8th to 11th of October, 2019.
I have to go and get ready. It's time to party.
Women. But we, men, will be there too.
Please.
Thanks for saying. Oil prices fall as US-China increased tariffs on trade war. Let's join Kunle Ade for details.
Oil prices weakened on Monday after new tariffs imposed by the United States and China came into force, raising concerns about a further hit to global growth and demand for crude. Brent crude slipped 22 cents to 59.03 a barrel, while US oil was down 2 cents at 55.083 a barrel. The United States began imposing 15% tariffs on a variety of Chinese goods on Sunday, including footwear, smart watches, and flat panel televisions, as China put new duties on US crude, the latest escalation in a bruising trade war. And the 3-month deadline set by the Central Bank of Nigeria for bank customers to deposit dirty naira notes in their banks elapsed at the close of business on 2nd September 2019. The CBN has said that a large proportion of the 7.9 trillion pieces of naira notes in circulation are dirty, mutilated, and unfit for automated teller machines and over-the-counter payments. This is part of its efforts to improve the overall quality of the naira notes in circulation. And here is how Monday's tradings went on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. With business news, I'm Kunle Adeyeye.
All right, thank you very much, Kunle, for the business package. Next for us on the program, it's a review of some of the papers we have.
And our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Toby, is in the studio. You're welcome, as
Good
usual.
morning, thank you.
How's
Good
the
morning.
rains?
Rains, well, it's a bit little. We are probably getting into what is called August break.
Yeah.
But good morning, Kingsley.
August break.
Good morning, Nigeria.
It's September, yes, sir.
Yes, at least in Abuja.
Yes.
But it turned out that virtually every day in August, it rained in Abuja.
Yes. In fact, Abuja became almost like Port Harcourt or Warri.
That's right, that's right.
Yes, and so the break that usually had in August probably will be coming in September.
Yes, that's what I heard. Yes.
Well, we'll check out what the weather guys will say going forward. But the rains have been a blessing in some respects in Abuja, but of course a disaster elsewhere in the country. And that's the lead story for the Punch newspaper, by the way. Punch newspaper says on its front page, governors take panicky measures as floods ravage states. The details of the story can be found on page 2, but there are 3 riders to that. Ekiti to begin dredging and marks houses for possible demolition. Gombe not sensitizing residents, loses 2,200 farms. States should demolish houses on waterways, and that's according to NISA. That's the Hydrological Services Agency. So as I said, that's the lead story for the Punch newspaper. But of course, there are other stories also on this front page, and most prominent will be the photographs there showing a coalition of civil society groups during a protest over the $9.6 billion court judgment against Nigeria. The protest, of course, took place at the British and Irish embassies in Abuja on Monday. That's the lead story for the Daily Trust as well. Daily Trust this time, which says $9.6 billion judgment. EFCC launches forensic probe as presidency denies meeting with P&ID. And then you have a photograph of the protesters there with several placards indicating their displeasure with the judgment debt against Nigeria. And Nigeria rejects fraudulent judgment from British court. British court ruling will ruin our economy. $9.6 billion judgment is a big fraud. You have some typos there. And then we call for a stay of execution of the judgment to save our assets from being fraudulently taken. Jume, let's take some other headlines.
Yeah, the headlines from the Daily Sun newspaper is quite a little bit different from what you read. Our headlines asked, 3 Nigerians are killed, shops burnt. FG talks tough over mob attacks in South Africa. And with a rider, enough is enough, says Foreign Affairs Minister Oyema. You find the details on page 40. And the picture message there, Chief of Staff to the President Abubakar with the Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami, at the Presidential Villa in Abuja yesterday. And just below the picture story, 300 million scandal. ICPC to interrogate Jonathan's minister. You find details on page 4 and 5. And just beside the picture story, Supreme Court strikes out perjury suit against Buhari. You find that on page 39. EFCC arrests 393 suspects in Kanu, Edo, secures 53 convictions. And just by the side of the Daily Trust, Daily Sun, 9.6 billion, FG reopens talks with PI and ID with Rider or Shibajo, Malami, Ahmed, Magu, others meet. You find that on page 6. And coming from the Blueprint newspaper, just below the masthead, Supreme Court strikes out perjury suit against Buhari. You've heard that in all the other papers. You find that on page 6. 6 killed, 17 injured in Anambra auto crash. Quite a sad story there. And you find the details on page 41. Beside the masthead, SEC urges defunct AfriBank shareholders to claim dividends. That's on page 34. Economic development, South Africa, Nigeria, hurting Africa. The details on page 33. And the bold headlines, insecurity, Southwest, Southeast governors strategize against herders and others. With a rider, security situation stabilized nationwide. That's coming from the Inspector General of Police. You find that on page 6. And the picture story there, Governor Aminu Bello Masari of Katsina State, his deputy Alhaji Muniri Yakubu, Managing Director of Aliko Dangote Foundation, Zuwaira Yusuf, Permanent Secretary to the Deputy Governor's Office, Alhaji Lawal Umar Maska, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Lands and Survey, Hajia by Rayana Lawal, and Alhaji Musa Bala, second right, when the Dangote Foundation boss paid a courtesy visit to Governor Masari on Monday. Just below the picture story, we find still the story on the 9.6 billion judgment saga. Hope raises as FG reopens talks with P and ID. You find that on page 5. At the bottom plate of the Blueprint newspaper, State House Clinic, dialysis, ultrasound machine. You find the details on page 5. ICPC to seize 840 million from ex-judge. That's on page 15. Bus crashes father, son, motorcyclist in Oshun. You find that on page 41. And APC knocks Niger Delta governors over NDDC board comments. Details on page 41.
Thank you, Jume. It's often said that if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. If you recall, between June and July, the NIMET and the Hydrological Institute had given flood alarm, but most state emergency services folded their arms and waiting now. And so what you have now with demolition and also clearing flood path are all reactions, which if they had been proactive earlier on, the consequences would have been reduced. And now, many of our capital cities are inundated with flood water. The other development that is worrying is the spate of road accidents. Usually, road accidents occur mostly during festive periods. But within the past 2 weeks, there has been a reported instance, the one we just reported now, Anambra, about 6 killed. Yes. Just only last week, Jigawa, 15 people killed in an accident. The previous week, Kwara State students who were going to UTME, 14 of them killed in road crash. Something has to be done by the Federal Road Safety Commission to save this gruesome killing of Nigerians on our highway. Now, on the issue of $9.6 billion award against Nigeria, coalition of civil society groups demonstrated yesterday at 2 venues, the High Commission of the United Kingdom and the Embassy of Ireland. They carried various placards reading $9.6 million judgment, a fraud. No to illegal takeover of our national assets. Nigeria rejects fraudulent judgment of British judge. The president and secretary of the coalition society presented letters to the High Commissioner and as well as the embassy. And they have promised that that demonstration will continue until their demand is heard. Meanwhile, at the Supreme Court has thrown out the case filed by 3 lawyers claiming perjury by President Muhammadu Buhari. The panel of justices led by Justice Mary Odili held that the suit was status barred. It may be recalled that the suit was actually filed at the Federal High Court in May, and they had demanded that President Muhammadu Buhari submitted false information of his qualification, that therefore he should be disqualified, and he should be removed by INEC as an APC presidential candidate and should be stopped from so parading himself. When it went to appeal, the Court of Appeal said that the case was filed outside the 14 days provided by the law, thereby upholding what the High Court ruling. The Court of Appeal says, consequently, it has been robbed of its jurisdiction to entertain the case. It was the same thing. That's what was held at the Supreme Court. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court justices yesterday found that a state council of the Ministry of Justice representing the president, particularly in his private capacity, they warned that and declared that such is a contravention of the Code of Conduct of Public Officers. Public office should not be used to defend private litigation. The president was sued in his private capacity. There are 2 stories that have been read about corruption, and it's very intriguing. The Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Offences Commission has sought a court order to withhold $840 million from a retired president of Benue State Customary Court of Appeal. It is alleged that the judge had used her photograph and the name of her maid to open a deposit account. The first amount paid in was 15 million, and the second amount was about 200 and something million. And these were all paid between the year 2018 and 2019. It is said to be above her income. Similarly, the spokesperson for the Independent and Corrupt Practices Commission, Rashida Dokulwa, also indicated that the former Minister of Health was alleged to have misappropriated 800 million. This was money that was meant for constituency project for Gusau, and it was alleged that between 2011 and 2014, the sums of money were diverted by the Honorable Minister for Health then and the Permanent Secretary. And so ICPC is holding them accountable for that.
Okay, Bayo, thanks. Let's take other headlines from the 2 papers I have, The Punch and Daily Trust. Now, above the nameplate of the Punch newspaper, Nigeria earned 35 trillion naira from tax in 8 years. That's on page 27 in further details. You also have there detention, 123 Jigawa men sue Lagos State government for 1 billion naira. That's page 6. And 2 earpieces there beside the nameplate of the Punch. Oshibajo and ministers meet on $9.6 billion judgment, decline comments. Maina's name disappears from watch list and 2.1 billion naira case dropped. That's page 11. And then right at the foot of the paper, just below the photographs on the front page of the Punch, Mambila project. Nigeria risks another $2.3 billion fine. That's on page 30. Nigeria risks another $2.3 billion fine. That's page 30. And youth protest 300 million naira Zamfara constituency project fund diversion. South Africans attack Nigerians, loot shops, and Onyema and Dabiri react. Erosion exhumes dead bodies in Kano, page 9. And security operatives repel bandits' attack on Katsina community. And to the Daily Trust newspaper, below the nameplate, 2 headlines which I take from there. UTME, JAMB and NIMSI to check underage registration. That's page 5. And oil slips, that's oil prices now, as US and China add more tariffs in trade war. And then right at the bottom of the front page, female cyber fraudster on FBI list arrested in Edo. Don't allow rigging of Kogi and Bayelsa polls, NCP tells INEC. And how 8 NIPP plants scaled up power by 4,000 megawatts, page 22. Bayo.
Yes, reporting about fraud. The Nigerian Deposit Insurance Corporation has reported that there were 37,817 fraud cases by bank workers in 2018 alone. Already this year, 2019, there have been instances of fraud involving 12.01 billion naira. And so total for these 2 years now, if you put them together, it is over 37.817 billion. Now, the interesting and the worrying thing about is that in 2018, 899 workers were involved in fraud and forgery cases. The number of them were mostly temporary staff, which were about 394, and that is 43.8%. Officers and executives were 206 involved in such cases, and that is 23%, while supervisors and managers had 119 cases, that's about 13.24. You recall, Kingsley, we discussed this issue about the hazard of having staff who are not committed to the services because you have an outside agency who recruit staff on behalf of the bank. They are supposed to pay them 100,000 naira a month. The outside agency pays them 40,000 naira a month, and these people are in the bank, they have no commitment, and fraud is going on the increase. Yes, and this is the alarm that the NDIC has raised.
That's right. It's unfortunate. But there's also the other story. Once again, South Africa is up in flames. Yes. This time, another flare-up of xenophobic attacks. Nigerians, of course, amongst those who have been targeted. Their businesses and shops have been razed. And there are a few fatalities, we understand. Now, I think that, well, the Nigerian authorities, keep seeking engagement with the South African counterparts. And in Japan the other day, President Muhammadu Buhari raised the issue with the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. Unfortunately, nothing appears, to come out of these diplomatic efforts. And it's pretty sad that South Africans, often vent their anger, vent their anger on foreigners, in particular Africans. There are other nationals who are outside of the African continent. Why are their businesses not being targeted? And Bayo, Juma, you won't believe this. Well, of course, it was reported a couple of weeks ago. The South African authorities detained an aircraft belonging to Air Tanzania, an Airbus, and on account that they were going to use that aircraft to defray the cost of a judgment debt. A judgment debt in favor of a South African national whose farm was amongst those nationalized many years ago in Tanzania, and he said that he had not been paid his full compensation. And the Tanzanians, of course, went about protesting in their own country. And when I read that story, I said to myself, you know, Julius Nyerere would be spinning in his grave.
Yes.
Because the Tanzanians made a lot of commitment to the liberation struggle in Southern Africa, in particular in South Africa.
Yes.
So similarly in Nigeria, such commitment, serious commitment. Several South Africans were given scholarship and they were schooling. Some of us were our classmates in schools and they benefited from this. But the latest report came from attack around 2:30 a.m. of businesses and premises and persons of many of whom are Nigerians. Already, you know, our foreign minister is always a gentleman, very calm. But this time around, he is angry because in spite of measures and overtures to the South African authorities, and in spite of the assurances that they want the security agencies and judicial system to take care of it, it is going on the increase, and sometimes the police in South Africa are there, are observers and watching and doing nothing.
Exactly. Watching the video trending yesterday on the social media, I felt really, really disappointed.
It's pain.
Because Nigerians stood firm against apartheid and fought for their independence. Well,
yeah, I mean, it's not just Nigerians are a target. Mozambicans are also targeted. Zimbabweans are also targeted.
Ghanaians.
This were the front line states other than Ghana.
Yes.
You know, Mozambique, I mean, took a battering and a beating from apartheid South African defense forces. And in fact, it is alleged that the South African apartheid authorities were responsible for the plane crash that led to the death of Samora Machel in October 1986.
Indeed, the front line states were those that were contiguous to South Africa. But because of Nigeria's...
Plus Nigeria, yes.
But because of Nigeria's commitment to South Africa, Nigeria, in spite of the distance, Nigeria was regarded as one of the front line states because of our commitment against fighting apartheid.
And we keep hearing the rationalization, these are young South Africans, they have no sense of the history of the contribution of other African countries to the liberation struggle, they are merely dealing with existential issues. Well, that is not the business of other Africans. If you fail to teach your children the proper history of your country, then at some point you will also have to face the consequences. You can't be killing Nigerians. You recall there was a tally sometime, over 120 Nigerians.
As the last count, 130 within the period of about 3 years.
Yes, I think that perhaps, you know, I don't know whether it's a matter for the AU to take up or otherwise, but the South Africans have to do something about these recurrent incidents of xenophobic attacks.
They really need to look into it. And away from South Africa, our editorial is coming from the New Telegraph, and it's on lessons from 2019 African Games. I'm going to read just a portion. The 12th African Games, which started on August 16th in Rabat, Morocco, came to a close at the weekend with plenty of lessons for Nigerians to learn. Though we congratulate Nigerian athletes for fighting hard to place second after a rather slow start due to the country's inability to compete well in swimming and other medal spinning sports, Team Nigeria should be winning the African Games if there are proper plans to get the best from the talents at the country's disposal. In the past, all the federations embark on training tours before major competitions like the African Games, Commonwealth Games, and the Olympics. So it's sad that Nigerian teams is fast losing grip in areas of core competence.
Yes, Nigeria came second, having won 46 gold, 33 silver, and 47 bronze. This was after Egypt that won. However, Egypt was able to surpass Nigeria because of the dominance, particularly in events like swimming. And it is not now. Even when Nigeria hosted the All-African Games, a young lady of about 15, 17, Fatena Assisi, I remember her, she registered more than 6 gold medals in swimming alone, one single individual. And come to think of it, the whole of our Niger Delta is water-based and we have swimmers there. Why have we failed to cultivate the opportunity to cash in on this high? And also, our area of strength used to be field, track and field. Yes. Already, we are losing grip to others. And we need to at least revive the Honorable Minister, new Honorable Minister for Sports, must ensure that sports facilities like what we had at Afuze are revived and across the country. And they should also revive school sports so that we'll be able to encourage, pluck all the talents from the youth and groom them until stardom, because it is an opportunity for our youth, and it will help eliminate restlessness and their adventure into crime.
Yeah, I read somewhere that the new Minister of Sports now said that he's going to be confrontational. He's going to address the issues head on. So I think we should expect something positive coming out from that.
Yes, and so attention should be diverted for
to the
concentration only on football. There are several other sports. Currently, many are not even aware that our basketball team is in a world context. We lost our first match to Russia and second match to Argentina. But if you are playing renowned teams like Argentina and Russia, and the margin was not as what it used to be some couple of years ago, it means we are making progress in that direction.
Yes, yes.
All right, Bayo, thanks a lot. I mean, I was going to talk about tennis, but since we're talking about other sports, that can be popularized. Yes. I quite agree with you.
Like swimming.
But interestingly, Nigeria also recorded success at the just concluded All Africa Games in one of the water sports. That's canoeing. Canoeing. So it's showing some response to all of that. I mean, those in the Niger Delta region can complain that their waters are now brackish on account of pollution arising from crude oil exploration and production. But elsewhere where the waters aren't so polluted, they can. They have natural water courses for all of these sports, whether it's kayaking, canoeing, rowing, and so on and so forth. And more particularly, the advent of natural swimmers who are then trained to become elite competitors.
Russia has been training swimmers from birth.
Yes. Even
giving birth in the swimming pool, automatic swimming.
Presently, we have abandoned sports facility. Well, there's one at Ahmadu Bello Stadium, built during the time of President Shehu Shagari, Olympic-sized swimming pool. It is there abandoned.
I'm sure that these are issues that said the sports authorities will take a look at. Bayo, thank you for being around.
Thank you too, as always.
Thank you.
You may enjoy your day.
All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria, still on the network service of the NTA. We're taking a short break now. When we return, we'll get ahead with our issue for conversation this morning.
They are there at the crack of dawn. They are there busy preparing while we rise for our day. They are there silently, guarding, waiting, listening, and watching. They are there ready in the sky above and the waters below, in the blistering heat of the day, in the dead of night, willing, indefatigable, determined in the defense of the sovereignty of our country. They are our first line of defense and our last. They who have paid the ultimate price in defending us. They are fathers and uncles. They are mothers and sisters and girlfriends and boyfriends. They are brothers and cousins and best friends and neighbors. They are classmates, colleagues, and citizens of this nation. They are our defenders and deserve our respect, our prayers, our thoughts. Nigeria, please support our armed forces.
Advertising your goods and services on the right channel gives you an edge over your competitors. NTA News 24 has all the platforms for your target audience. The station is on DSTV channel 419, GoTV channel 46, StarTimes channel 101, and Free TV channel 703. With our digital format and wide range, we can reach your customers in next to no time. We are eager to promote your business, goods, and services. So, partner with us for a very rewarding business experience. For more information, please call Henry on 0803-379-0884 or visit our office at NTA Headquarters, Area 11, Garki, Abuja. NTA News 24. News and more news.
You are watching NTA, Nigerian Television Authority. For more information and news updates, visit our website at www.nta.ng, or you can follow us on Twitter at NTA News Now, or you can like us on Facebook at NTA Network News. Stay connected on our YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/NTA News Online. Watch our live stream at www.nta.ng/live. NTA, you can't beat the rich.
All right, you're welcome back, and you're still watching us on Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. A fortnight ago, President Muhammadu Buhari inaugurated his new cabinet, and what emerged from the inauguration ceremony was also the creation of several new entities, particularly ministries. One in particular is that of the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development. There was also the merger, of course, of the Ministries of Finance and Budget and National Planning. This morning, we are taking a look at the task ahead of the new ministry in charge of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development. With us in the studios to discuss this, let's welcome Chuks Akamadu, of the Alliance Against Drug Abuse. Chuks Akamadu, pleasure to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thanks for having me. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right. So also here with us in the studios, we'd like to welcome Reverend Father Emeka Chris Obiezu, is immigration governance expert as well as coordinator of the Augustine Center for Peace, Advocacy and Peace Justice. Once again, I take that once again. Reverend Father Emeka Obiezu is a migration governance expert and coordinator of the Augustine Center for Peace, Advocacy and Justice. Reverend Father Emeka, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Clem Oluwole is managing editor and columnist with the Blueprint newspapers based here in Abuja. Clem, pleasure to have you with us on the program. And last but not the least, regular face on Good Morning Nigeria, Dr. Abdulrahman Abu Hamisu, a researcher and public affairs analyst. Hamisu, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Good morning, Nigeria.
Okay, well, let's begin the conversation this way. I mean, we started off when we had the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning. We asked what the rationalization was, in our opinion, for the merger of finance and budget and national planning, considering that only the first term of the president, the two were separated. Well, here we have a ministry of, federal ministry, by the way, of humanitarian affairs, disaster management, and social development. Is there any congruence involving these three heads, or we have a new super ministry? Dr. Hamisu first.
Okay, for those that are familiar with the humanitarian world, you come to agree with the fact that though the ministry may look very big, but the work that needs to be done are interrelated. Though I have the opportunity to work in that very particular corridor, and you cannot separate issues around humanitarian intervention from disaster management as well as social development. But sometimes it equally involves children that needed to grow in a certain environment and then reintegrating those people back into the society. So even from the Nigerian national security strategy, issues around threats arising from the environment, man-made disasters and stuff like that has to do with humanitarian intervention. And with what is happening in Nigeria, for instance, you have humanitarian issues going on in the Northeast, which is the largest in the east of Africa. Then you talk about the refugees from Cameroon that are in Cross River. Then you come back to North Central Nigeria, where you have a lot of issues around farmers, herders, and clashes that has resulted into displacement of persons that are living in camps. So all of this call for a strategic framework that's supposed to focus on these issues and give them the needed context within which they can be resolved properly for effective functioning of those displaced persons back in the society again. And lastly, there is something that is going on in the state, and even the papers reported one of it, which is flooding. Year in, year out, the federal government is saddled with the responsibility of having to assist victims of flood, where you have state emergency management agencies that have really not done anything in terms of effective framework to manage such situations so that reoccurrence is prevented. So what has been happening is people are displaced, federal government give them support, they go back to the same area that they were displaced last year, and then before you know, the next issue will be they are not properly sensitized and stuff like that. So if you have a ministry that is charged with a problem-solving approach, I'm using this word because I know the implication, problem-solving approach. For instance, if this ministry is charged with problem-solving capacity, to the extent that our crises are managed in such a way that reoccurrence is managed and will not have reoccurrence, I think that is the right word, will not have a recurrence of it, is going to save Nigeria a lot of money than this ad hoc arrangement. This state is doing something different, the other state is doing something different within the same. So I think this very particular ministry is the right framework that we needed if the right structures are put in place, right attitude, right manpower. I'm using the word right because I know that some of these things could be established, but getting them to function properly to achieve the mandate for which it was established becomes a problem. So for me, it is a right framework that we're supposed to use to solve these problems of humanitarian crisis that we are witnessing, disaster management. Disaster management is very poor. That is just the truth of the matter. And then social development. Social development is the development of social and emotional skills for either kids or any other person to assist them to function properly. So for me, it's the right thing to do, and it's very strategic.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Abdulrahman Hamisu. Let's bring in Reverend Father Chris Obiezo. It's still on seeking to understand, the creation of this new ministry, at least from the perspective of outsiders. Would it be, in a sense, a surplusage to have added social development when disaster management and humanitarian issues are plenty in the country?
Thank you once again. Just like Doctor said, those three areas are interrelated and cannot be separated in terms of responses to the issues they raise. And creating it actually responds to the reality of what happens in the humanitarian landscape today, globally, if we have to situate it where it belongs. What we are experiencing in the humanitarian action is a systemic issue of expansion in terms of humanitarian needs as well as in terms of responses. We are beginning to see multiplicity as well as complexity of humanitarian needs. And we're beginning to see also the rising of new and different actors as well as the emergence of new forms and the modalities of assistance. So when all these things are in play, whether they are being recognized as a threat or as a welcome event, they suggest that the traditional understanding of humanitarian action or humanitarian aid has expanded beyond those dominant understanding that there is a particular institution that handles it. For instance, even in the global world, it is now established or known that the traditional institutions, whether they are state or non-state actors, such as the UN itself, can no longer have or do no longer have a monopoly of delivering service either to alleviate poverty or to solve, assist in terms of conflict. So this actually, I think what Nigeria is doing is keying into what is already existing. As far back as in 1987, the World International Body created the World Humanitarian Commission just to do this, and that was followed up in the 1991 creation of the UN Office for the Coordinating of Humanitarian Affairs. That steps down even to the African Union having it. Just in 2016 here, the different humanitarian actors in the country have come together to form what we call the humanitarian country team with operational guides on how to do it. So, like when we look at the landscape, there is interconnectedness of issues. Humanitarian emergency is anything at all that threatens the well-being of the individual. And humanitarianism itself is this belief in the human person. So it could be social issues, could be disaster. And looking at Nigerian terrain, we see the diversity playing out, the multiplicity playing out, both in the needs and in the actors as well. So creating an office like this is, I think it should be charged with a clear purpose, and that will be purpose of coordinating. It is not going to usurp the power of other ones or kill the other ones, because there are needs to have all these actors play. But when they are not coordinated, what we see is either duplication of activities or even loss of efficiency in response. And those who will bear the brunt of these inconsistencies and inefficiencies will be the beneficiaries themselves. And this is why in situations where we need what we call durable solutions, take for instance the IDP he mentioned. The IDP rises from the state of emergency to the state of durable solution. Emergency, you respond to the need. But what happens? He said, you rush with humanitarian aids, relief of all kinds. But when that ends, what happens to the IDPs? They naturally want to return back to their original place or want to resettle somewhere where they will have their life. But when you don't have a coordination in that way, then we don't have it happen. So I think one of the key things this ministry is going to do is to provide that space of coordination that will enhance collaboration of actors. Know you that there are special agencies in the country that are facing or responding to issues of humanitarian and social issues. But there are also the crisscrossing of all ministries, departments and agencies. For instance, it could happen from health, security, and other things. But all these ministries have to do something. But when everybody is in the field and everybody is doing something, targeting one goal or one person, one constituency, when they are not coordinated, we can see the fallout from there. And this is what is happening, like he said, with our disaster management is poor because of lack of coordination. We have a national policy on IDP that is still waiting for how long to be adopted, because we are still not sure where it situates. So a commission a ministry like this should be able to enhance, speed up the adoption of that policy, domicile it in the place where it's supposed to be for effective operational usage of such policies. So I would think, just as he said, social dimension of it is a key ingredient to what it means to respond to social issues, especially when we are concerned with tackling the root causes. Because sometimes we stay on the periphery, and so we always attack symptoms, and then the issues remain. So at the basis of most of these things are social cohesion, like in terms of crisis between communities. So a commission like this should provide strategic framework that will enable people to foresee beforehand in a kind of proactional dimensions. See these things beforehand, propose strategies of cutting it down, or in certain situations as well, provide a mechanism that ensures that there is, again, a durable solution to this issue, that they may not be returning again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You've raised a lot of issues. I'll come in now to Mr. Chuks Akamadu. Alliance Against Drug Abuse.
Yes, ma'am.
It's one of the disaster eating deep into the fabric of our nation. Yeah, a lot of kids, women, and children have been lost along that line. It has generated a lot of discourse. Let's look at the synergy between the ministry and the state governments, SEMA, NEMA, and the new ministry now. So how should they synergize between themselves to ensure that, social development responsibilities should not go beyond what we know in this country now? How do we assess, aid? How do we assess all these things? And how does the ministry synergize with the state government to ensure that it's kickstarts its work very, very fast?
Thank you very much. Foremost, I would like to commend Mr. President for showing this humane part of him. With the creation of this Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management, and Social Development, Nigerians can now clearly say that Mr. President feels the pains of the average Nigerian. We never knew that he had been having sleepless nights over disasters, over rising humanitarian issues, and of course the social development deficit that Nigeria has recorded over time. Having said that, I would also want to thank him for deeming it fit to appoint a woman as the pioneer minister of that ministry, because a woman, of course, would always be best suited to champion such causes. And thankfully, he did his homework very well by picking Hajia Sadia Omar Farouk. With her background in the Refugee Commission, just background, of course, sterling accomplishments, we couldn't have had a better deal. That's it. The issue of drug abuse is actually a worsening emergency on our hands. And it is refreshing to note that we now have a ministry that will be in a position to stimulate the requisite interest across board. When I say across board, of course, I mean across state actors and non-state actors. You were talking about how the federal government can begin to engage state governments to tackle the menace of drug abuse. It doesn't stop there. I think we now have a ministry that should look at it holistically and begin to think of a lasting solution. We now have a ministry that should properly contextualize this scourge of drug abuse to enable Nigerians to realize that we've all actually become critical stakeholders, because the menace of drug abuse is such that it has overwhelmed the state institutions that are statutorily charged to deal with it. NDLEA can no longer do it alone. The Nigerian police cannot do it alone. What do you call it? NAFDA cannot do it alone. But with the coming of this ministry, my expectation is that the ministry will begin to look at how it can involve the 3 tiers of government and the 3 arms of government, really. When the ministry interfaces with the 3 tiers of government and 3 arms of government, that way the private sector can also be reached out to, because the corporate social responsibility of multinationals and other blue chip companies also will have to come in here to complement the commendable effort of the government. And again, I would want to talk about the social development dimension of this ministry. I consider it as the most heartwarming thing that would happen to us in recent times. Why? Because before now, the social development department had always been with the sports youth. But now it's been brought home to this ministry. Home in the sense that if you look at humanitarian affairs, it's curative. It's some kind of intervention that you're doing. If you look at disaster management, it's intervention again. But the social development dimension is very good because it seeks to tackle the issues at the very root. It's preventive. Because the social development, when you look at social development, the entire gamut of the social development dimension of this ministry requires us to begin to look at even our family unit. How do we raise our children? How do we get to a situation where secondary school students now go for drugs as though their lives depend on it? Of course, this explains that, come on, somehow our values have collapsed over time. And of course, we must all find the courage to admit that indeed our institutions have failed. Secondary school, our teachers, our schools, our mosques, our churches, our name it. So that's why we expect that in the days ahead, this ministry would begin to engage these diverse stakeholder groups and ensure that a harmonious action plan is conceived, and everybody must take a part in it so that at the end of the day, we can retrieve our youth from the claws of drug abuse. Otherwise, we are really in danger. A station whereby as far back as 2017, the Kaduna Neuropsychiatric Hospital released figures that the figures indicated that in the Northwest alone, 600 million bottles of codeine expectorant are sold on daily basis. What a massive economy. We can't continue like this. Something just has to be done. And then, interestingly, we have the Presidential Advisory Committee on Elimination of Drug Abuse headed by Brigadier General Buba Marwa, retired, and all of that. So things actually are looking up for us if the right things are done by this new ministry.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Kamadu, for your point. We're able to get into the nitty-gritty of the conversation as already touched on by the other guests. But Clem Oluwole, we would like to have your views on this. I mean, some persons have said, some commentators have observed that humanitarian affairs and disaster management on their own are big challenges in our current state of things, and that to add social development to it would appear to be excessive. I mean, if we were talking about floods a while ago, Hamisu was drawing our attention to the fact that you need to coordinate, you need to be effective. If you have 36 SEMAs and you have the FCT, that's 37, and then you have the NEMA itself, and then you have insurgency, you have farmers' herders clashes, you have communal clashes, and you have all kinds of displacement. And we don't appear to be up to scratch with regard to our response to humanitarian crisis. So if crisis is what humanitarian affairs and disaster management will be, social development would be generally, under situations that are not of a crisis nature, why lump all of them together?
Well, I think first and foremost, like the barrister said, Mr. President, in his wisdom, thought it wise to create this new ministry. Why not reading the minds of the Mr. President before taking that decision? I think about 2 years or so ago, the United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs classified Nigeria, Somalia, Yemen, and South Sudan as 4 countries with the highest numbers of displaced persons on earth. And that's, the statistics are quite frightening. They said about 20 million Africans are internally displaced. Of this figure, the Northeast and Lake Chad region are home to 8.5 million out of the 20 million that are internally displaced on the continent. And of this 8.5 million, the 3 states of Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe, which are the hotbeds of this Boko Haram insurgency, also account for about 1.8 million of internally displaced people.
The United Nations also, in its wisdom, set up August 19 every year as World Humanitarian Day. That shows that humanitarian crisis is a global phenomenon which nobody can wish away. Until the Boko Haram insurgency came up, we never had any such crisis of this magnitude, apart from the Niger Delta militancy that displaced, and those were very isolated. When compared to what has been going on in the Northeast, which snowballed to other states like North Central, Northwest, and such places across the country, we discovered that the establishment of this new ministry is not only timely, but long overdue. Okay? And also coupled with the flood disasters that we are witnessing all over the country now. I think the first major one was recorded in 2012. And the federal government at that time set up a committee, I think headed by Aliko Dangote, to manage the crisis. Funds were raised across the states. But over time, it built up to what we are witnessing since the onset of flooding. I think it was mentioned by one of the discussants that in August alone, it rained all through the month of August. Places that were not known for flooding began to experience massive flooding. Houses destroyed, businesses destroyed, lives lost, and so on and so forth. So when you aggregate all this together, you discover that the time is ripe to have a ministry that will take full responsibility for all this crisis. We have SEMA, we have NEMA. All these agencies should be subsumed under the new ministry and be given a direction. This new ministry can only function properly if the required leadership is provided, if the support is given, if it is well funded, okay? And in funding, we expect that the ministry will seek synergy with the National Assembly. Because this ministry is coming up in the middle of the, well, towards the end of the year. There's no budget in place, I believe. But you cannot, as you said, you cannot shift somebody behind him or plant somebody, say, behind her. So with the ministry in place now, it will provide policy framework. It will also put in place the right mechanism that will drive the ministry to achieve the desired goal. As for the margin of social development to the ministry, I wouldn't see it as surplus to requirement, because instead of, your attention being distracted here and there, you now have all these very important aspects under one roof to be coordinated by a ministry. And like the barrister said, it is the new minister appointed for that ministry is cut out for responsibility because of pedigree in the Refugees, National Refugees Commission. So I believe that she will not hit the ground running. She's already running. Okay? She's already running because of the background, because of her background, where she was coming from. So the attachment or the inclusion of the social development is very key, in the sense that all these humanitarian crises, all these disaster crises, they have far-reaching implications on the social, economic lives of the victims. So with that social development attached to that ministry, the minister or the minister rather, will be able to harness all resources, logistic resources, and other needs to be able to move, to find lasting solution to the problems that I think are fallout of humanitarian crisis and disaster crisis. Okay? The social development primarily remains a victim, as it were, of all these disasters, all this humanitarian crisis. So it's very good and appropriate that this social development ministry, development is attached to this ministry. It should not be seen as doing surplus requirement. And then besides, I also want to talk about a very important aspect, the absence of which, or the mismatch of which, has led to this humanitarian crisis that has engulfed this nation. Forget about disaster management, because disasters could be man-made and often natural. Okay? So it is very, very necessary to also tackle what the causative factors of this humanitarian crisis, which is insecurity. Okay? I'm very personally happy that the Ministry of, in spite of the brouhaha over the increase in the size of the cabinet of President Muhammadu Buhari, I'm personally happy that the Police Affairs Ministry is back. It was created during Obasanjo, and it was taken out at a point, but I'm personally happy that it's because I have been passionate about the police, the way police are treated in the security setup in the country. Presently, we have less than 400,000 police. You know what, Mr. Clement,
Okay.
we'll return to that when we have enough time in the course of this conversation. Our chief focus this morning has to do with the humanitarian affairs, disaster management, and social development. Now, in terms of agenda setting for the new ministry, which is an amalgam of a number of agencies that previously undertook these responsibilities, let's return again to our evaluation of what the state is of our response to disasters, whether at the national or subnational levels, and then to the humanitarian crisis that erupt in different parts of the country. First, Reverend Father Obiezu, and then Dr. Hamisu.
Yeah. Again, when we go back to our disaster management in terms of what we do, I again bring the merging together of the needs and the response. And it has come up from our conversation here that, especially bringing in the social dimension of it, that when we separate social development, when we separate, we are actually cutting off the root causes of most of these things. He put aside disaster as something that could come prepared or unprepared. But the reoccurrence of certain humanitarian issues, emergencies, are rooted in absence or well-managed social issues. So, and that plays out in how we respond when we have a humanitarian issue. What do we have? We have a multiplication of actors. People tell you this is what they do better, and they jump into it. And at the end, everybody is responding to that, which is the tip of the iceberg. And when we do that, we find out that just sometimes we might be lucky to have a 1 year to come before they come up again. But sometimes as you are getting out of the scene, you are seeing the same thing again. So it calls back to the issue of doing a very strategic work of planning. A planning that is holistic, a planning that is inclusive. This is where I return back to the point I made, that the creation of this ministry should not by any attempt, and I know the minister, being who she is, having worked in an office that coordinated different arms of mobility, she is able to know that the best way to get a result is to provide a platform of collaboration have inclusive participation of all actors. So to set the ball rolling for a good success should be this ministry, first and foremost, mapping out which areas fall under it. Who are the actors in this field? Without any bias, without any preconception of anything, invite everybody to a conversation that we first define and understand what is the distinctive purpose of each of these ministries or agencies or whatever they are. What are your mandates? What are you able to do? Then assess their operation already. What have you been able to do executing your own mandates? Then what are your challenges? Then the question is, what can we achieve better doing it together? This is where the coordination is very important. And as I said, Nigeria is not doing something new by creating this. In short, somebody said it's long overdue. We are simply coming into play of what should be the coordination of humanitarian affairs by bringing in all these actors together. And that would, and foresee it, going to help our management of humanitarian issues step years ahead. If this ministry starts off well with what I've suggested, make that great effort in doing the homework of getting who are the actors, what are the areas needed, and then what strategic plans that will come in. I often, as a policy analyst, we usually think, or we usually say, which happens in most cases, that when there is an issue and the government doesn't want to solve it, they will create one policy or create one ministry or create one division. But looking at this, I said, okay, this is the time we have done something right. Because I don't see it as doing something different apart from this core coordination. As everybody have said here, there is a ministry, there is an agency, there is a group somewhere. Then let us not forget non-state actors. It is not just about the institutional state actors. There are 1,000 of non-state actors. We hear cases of international and local actors, non-governmental actors working in the Northeast. Some of them have gotten into unhealthy competition, and then we see some duplication of activities, and at the end, Northeast has been there for how long? And it's still there. And the attention is not just Northeast. Nigeria all over is boiling. And so if we do not do this mathematics very well at this particular time, and everybody has said it, looking at the pedigree of this minister, we are assured that she will gather the right people and be able to put the things right.
Dr. Hamisu.
Yeah, you know, sometimes there are responsibilities that can be overwhelming. But if you have your priorities mapped out, it is easier for you to achieve whatever you want to achieve. I know what is required for the ministry to really make impact are just three. One is the right leadership. The second thing, again, is the policy trust that the ministry wants to run with. Then the last one is funding. I had the opportunity to work with the minister on the tripartite commission for the repatriation of Nigerian refugees in Cameroon. So she chairs the technical working group that has been working in the last 2 years to ensure that these refugees are returned safely and in dignity. And to the best of my knowledge and what I know, in terms of coordination, you will not find out one thing. The only problem we're going to have, which is a normal problem in Nigeria, is tough war. As it is now, some ministries have started taking inventories, some agencies have started taking inventories. Okay, they've taken part of our power and given to the new ministry. They've taken some of our power and given. So the desire to collaborate is often dealt a fatal blow by tough war. Everybody wants to hold on to what they feel is their own mandate. But if the attitude that most of the MDs displayed on this very particular technical working group assignment is anything to go by, then I think she already have a model she can run with. She doesn't impose her will. We sit around the table and she asks of people's opinion based on the mandate of the organization. And everybody does, everybody says what the organization is doing, and you represent your organization. So the template is already there in terms of coordination that you'll be hammering. So as somebody rightly pointed out, she's already running, so she have that. Secondly, she was at the forefront of the humanitarian response, humanitarian dialogue for the Lake Chad region. That is the second version of it that I held in Transcorp. I think I chaired one of the sessions, and she was visible. So, in terms of humanitarian crisis in Lake Chad region, which is the biggest, as you rightly mentioned, there is a framework on the ground already. The next steps are there. She's conversant with it. She participated. She represented Nigeria all through the program. So she already know what the issues are around Lake Chad, especially these 4 countries, Cameroon, Chad, Niger, and then Nigeria. 4. And then they were in Transcorp, and the framework is there. Everything is there. Now, in terms of our refugees, the refugees from Cameroon that are in Cross River, she has been doing a lot, and she has mapped out most of the conflict areas where we have this humanitarian crisis. So what she needed in terms of that is there already. Now, the next problem will be, is the ministry coming to employ people to pay salary, or it is coming to function and work? We have to define that properly. That is, I said, the policy direction of the ministry is very key. Some of the ministries in this country have refused to do their work. They've turned themselves into 2 outlets. One for employing people and paying salary. The other one is giving out contract that will not even impact the lives of the people. So does this ministry want to go that direction? That is the question for the minister to answer. But if I were to, if I'm to advise her, I would turn that ministry into problem-solving ministry. By problem-solving ministry, we are going to have a policy direction that mandates states to take certain actions and responsibilities that prevent crisis, either from escalating or from equally preventing them from erupting, or that if they erupt, they're properly managed to the extent that the other end that you say is not excessive, use the word for it, that is the social development.
Yes.
Not surplus requirement. Not surplus. Because at the end of it all, he mentioned it, but that is the terms that is used for such thing in the developing world, which is durable solution. At the end of every disaster management, you are going to reintegrate people back into their communities. Orphans will be reintegrated back into their communities. Widows will be reintegrated back into their communities. So the end product of humanitarian responses, disaster management, is the social development. Because most of these people that are displaced must have lost a lot, and they needed to bounce back. So the social development angle of it is to give life back to these persons, from being supported in the camps to becoming useful for yourself and the society, which means you need durable solution. This durable solution could be skills. It could be farm input. It could be herbicide. It could be fertilizer. It could be nursery school. For instance, in the Northeast, particularly in Borno State, we have over 50,000 orphans.
More than.
Yeah, that's why I said over.
More than 100.
Yeah. So over 50, conservatively, that is the figure that we are using for now. Yeah. You have up to say, you have over 50,000. And these orphans needed somebody that will cater for them so that they will become useful to the society, so that they don't bear grudges against the society, so that they don't see the society as the cause of their problem. So social development angle of that very particular ministry is very, very vital. So for me, the policy direction should be problem solving. What I mean by problem solving is the one that ensure that, one, those that are preventable are prevented. You don't allow them to erupt. Those that we cannot prevent, we manage them in such a way that they don't escalate, they don't inflict misery. For instance, when you keep people in the camp, if there are no proper hygiene practices, relationships, the first thing you will get is escalation of health crisis. Yes. For instance, HIV/AIDS. For instance, tuberculosis. For instance, the issue of drugs that we are talking about. These are other additional costs that, if you don't manage crisis properly, is going to add burdens to the government by imposing additional costs in terms of diseases. Then the other aspect of the entire conversation, again, has to do with funding. Now, you cannot plan and be proactive if you cannot fund your activities properly. Now, this very particular agency, because I know what she went through to get funds released for the repatriation of the refugees. Okay, let us say because it is National Commission for Refugees. But are we willing as a nation that want to attract foreign investors to fund this ministry in such a way that the organizational structure is able to manage crisis to the extent that we can export the best practices that is coming out of those management to other countries? Now, this is another question we need to ask ourselves. So, this ministry cannot function without adequate funding to start with.
Yeah. Dr. Amisu, thanks. And Juma, I think we also need to clarify this. Obviously, once the ministry is up and running, as it were, the ministry will have departments, and those departments will have units. Yeah. So the presumption also will be some of the functions being undertaken today by some of the commissions, depending on how they are labeled, maybe then be subsumed under some of the ministries, under some of the departments or units, to have the links person from the ministry to the commissions. Because if a commission is established, a commission cannot be dissolved. I mean, unless also by an act that of the National Assembly. So those are formal issues that they will have to deal with going forward. Yes,
going forward. You know, I was thinking, you know, in a place like Maiduguri, talking about the Lake Chad and the insurgency, all these things we're talking about cannot be possible without tackling insecurity. And in Borno, she has a ministry that is already there, yes. RRR, yes. With the Pioneer Commissioner as the present governor of Borno State, working really hard. What we are seeing is an escalation of insecurity in Maiduguri, you know, and a lot of orphans, like you talked about, social responsibility, social development, all these things will come in cohesion with the state government. In Borno, I don't think it's going to be a problem, actually, because she has been there, she has been right in the middle of the crisis, all the way to Bama. There's no place she has not been in Maiduguri. And I think from the way she is moving now, Borno State and the Lake Chad will be a target for her to try as much as possible to ensure that these orphans who don't have parents are resettled. You know, so how can she in any way change the narrative?
Well, it has to do, because fundamentally, as I said, she's already on track.
Yes.
For instance, she's returning most of our refugees. And some of these issues that we've raised are issues that have been tackled already. Yes. And the pilot state is Adamawa State. Yes. Adamawa State has an agency that is responsible for peace. Yes. I think it's Agency for Peace. It was established by the former governor, Bindao. And that ministry, that very particular agency, we had interface with the executive director, which is Dr. Agoso. So, except for Yobe, I think, is Minister of Women Affairs that is handling some of these issues. In Borno, RRR as well as Minister of Women Affairs. So, she already have the contact. She already have the contact. Now, changing the narrative in the Northeast is simple, and she's already doing that in terms of the coordination she has brought to bear on this very particular job of repatriation. So what she needed to do is to leverage from the lessons that have been learned from this very particular repatriation, as well as other engagement. As I said, what has been constraining her is not knowing the issues. It's not even assembling the teams that are supposed to carry out these functions. What has been hampering our operation has to do with timely releases of funds, because she needs to just go to the presidency to source for funds, unlike other ministries that have their funds somewhere else. So the only thing again that she needed to do is to bring research to bear. Now, I don't know, but I stand to be corrected if I will have to advise federal government. Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution should be a part of this very particular ministry. Presently, it is domiciled in Foreign Affairs. Now, what they've been doing, for instance, if you see what we've done with them, that is Presidential Committee on the Northeast Initiative together with Institute for Peace, there is a framework to return peace to Taraba, in addition to what has been done for the Northeast. So, if we're talking about a ministry that's supposed to become preventive, and here you have an institute that is strategically placed to deal with recommendations affecting security. Yes. I participated in the launching of public presentation of the mappings of flashpoints or the crisis areas in Nigeria. That very particular document is wonderful. She needs it because it tells you areas where challenges of clashes, whether it is ethno-religious, whether it is farmers, elders, or what. It has already, the document has already mapped them. So all you need to do is to know these areas, have a proper preventive mechanisms in place. Those that you cannot prevent that erupt, you have second strategy of tackling them headlong. So changing the narrative in the Northeast is simple. One is funding, because the requirement in terms of the expertise she needed, the contact, all of those she has been coordinating with the state, and then she's doing wonderfully well. The only thing that is left is maybe by the time there is a national policy that she needed to follow up with the state and ensure that the state implement, that is where the new challenges will come from.
All right, Dr. Hamisu and the other guys, thank you very much. But I hope we're not creating the impression that this is a one-woman ministry or a one-person ministry. It's a ministry, we say we have departments and units, and of course you have a full complement of staff. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll take the tweets that have come in from our viewers and then return to our guests for the remainder of the conversation.
Hold it! Me, I don't commot my hand from oil bunkering.
General, what you going to yarn? What did the yarn say? I don't understand though.
Because they spoil our water and our environment. And they cause our people serious harm. Militants say, you know good. Me, I not do again, Sam. Because why? Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
You're welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Good Morning Nigeria. And we have guests in the studios. We've been discussing on the new ministry that has just been established by the president. And we have tweets coming in. Nigerians are talking. Kinsley?
Mike Ayanko has this tweet. Said, some jokingly call this ministry of happiness, but not the Imo State scenario under Rochas. Now, based on the recent developments in the country, the new ministry is very important. We have many persons displaced by disasters, and we say kudos, therefore, to the president, since the challenges facing those persons who are displaced will now be taken care of. We had hitherto witnessed high level of corruption in alleviating the plight of these displaced Nigerians. The ministry should access funds from international donor agencies as well.
And from Law Alpha C, in view of the recurring decimal of insecurity, banditry, insurgency, kidnapping, flooding, erosion, the task before this ministry is huge and hydra-headed. Kudos should be given to this administration for carving out this very important ministry, taking into consideration the exigencies of the present realities. Adequate funding is key in realizing its objective.
Sorry, Michael and Makroji. Now, with the establishment of the ministry, we expect NEMA, that's the National Emergency Management Agency, to function more than ever before. Expectation is also high that indigent Nigerians would be accorded more attention in the area of social investment aimed at fighting poverty and improving the lives of the impoverished.
And Ikeju Olagbaju tweets, apart from humanitarian component, the other components are well established in existing ministry and agencies. As at now, there are few or no humanitarian affairs officers in civil service. The ministry would need to rely on NGOs to play a greater role and do more of coordination.
Dele Jack Solomon tweets. Now, it says that Nigerians are expectant that the new ministry will be able to do all that is in its power to ameliorate the sufferings of IDPs. Now, a well-defined national policy on the IDPs through the ministry should help articulate a proper response on rights and privileges of this vulnerable group while in camp, as well as process of resettlement. Now, we expect better coordination of humanitarian services in the country.
And Badamasi Adamu tweets, the creation of the said ministry is a good development coupled with the insecurity that have engulfed the country. It will help in catering for the IDP. Like Fashola in the first time of PMB, the tasks are enormous, but with our experience, it's achievable, God willing.
Mohammed Satomi The new ministry should pay more attention to IDPs of Borno State because they are dying daily.
And DW Nigeria Limited tweets, this ministry appears to be duplicating the roles of NEMA and others. How are we going to address these roles played by NEMA? Does this mean they will be reporting to the new ministry? I see this ministry as another avenue to compensate political loyalists.
Uche Gabriel, there's no need for this ministry since NEMA is there and has been working hard in the area of humanitarian affairs and disaster management with their branches in the 36 states of Nigeria and Abuja.
And Ahmed Mohammed tweets, to me, this is one of the most important ministries created. It came at the time we needed it most. We have a lot of challenges, flooding, IDPs, especially in the Northeast. Let the minister take this into focus and take immediate action.
Kamilu Ibrahim Ramadan tweets, the ministry has to be proactive in the prevention of disasters.
And Obolama Babs tweets, as a new ministry, the name clearly shows the Herculean task before the ministry. Considering the current security imbroglio the country faces, the job is well caught out for the minister. Those who will be saddled with such responsibility from top to bottom should serve Nigeria and not self. The new ministry should work in synergy, not contrast with the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, and its state allied. There's a whole lot of jobs to be done, which includes assisting those repatriated from Libya and rescued from the Mediterranean in search of greener pasture.
Chris Simeon. Now, the new ministry should create a conducive atmosphere for international and local NGOs to come in and assist persons who are affected by one form of disaster or the other, conflict, flood, and so on. The ministry should see people as very important tools in developing society. Therefore, it should seek to address the underlying socio-economic factors that may lead to crisis.
And Ahmed Mohammed tweets, to me, this is one of the most important ministry. No, I think it's a repetition of the first tweet from me. Yes, Ahmed, yes.
All right. Now, well, let's again return to the situation that the new ministry is going to have to confront in terms of responding to either humanitarian situations or disasters, man-made or acts of God. This is what we sometimes see. Elsewhere, when disaster strikes, you find that plane loads of supplies are taken to those locations, usually from the developed world. But here, it appears that our response time is tardy, and by the time the aid relief gets there, you know, the persons would have lost a lot of lives, and then persons would have suffered a great deal of hardship. How can we bridge our response time? And how can we have proper linkages with industry? Because the goods or the relief aid that I just mentioned just now are usually produced by industry, warehoused, and then when disaster strikes, you find the transport planes, you know, taking them off. But here, it appears that whenever disaster strikes, you have to first award a contract. And by the time you are processing all of that, people are dying, houses are going, business farms are, you know, disappearing. How can we, in terms of the new orientation of having a ministry that is now a coordinator, take us to this new frontier of response time and response action to disasters and humanitarian crises in our country? Claire.
Yeah, I think the absence of this ministry or the coming of this ministry should be able to solve that problem. Among the tweets you just read, suppose are saying that the creation of that ministry is not necessary because NEMA is there, SEMA is there. But these are agencies that lack directions. The new ministry will now provide directions for these agencies.
I doubt if NEMA will agree with you on that. We've had NEMA DG here, and when it comes and it speaks and it tells you what they're doing and you see them doing, the challenge, it says, is usually with the linkage with the subnational entities, which are SEMAs. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, whether they like it or not, they have to be subsumed under this new ministry. It's not a matter of choice. Okay? It's a necessity now that they have to, the SEMA or the NEMA
we have to be subsumed under the new ministry. And then that does not stop them from coordinating with SEMA at the state levels. And then the issue of quick response, you have to consider our situation, our environmental situation. What are the logistics that are readily in place? The air transportation system is neither here nor there. Our routes are in a horrible, state. Okay, so without all this infrastructure, being put into place, it will be very, very difficult to respond, to emergency situation the way we see abroad. Okay, because if you look at even our air transportation system, what do we have in place apart from what the commercial, those are able to commercial business. In terms of government response to serious emergency situation, we don't have them.
The Air Force,
I don't know how many aircraft are at the disposal of the Nigerian Air Force, for instance. I don't know how many. Even the war we are fighting, how well equipped is our Air Force? To talk of having a big transport planes to be able to respond to emergency situation. So all that will have to be looked into by the new ministry. Okay, it should be part of the mandate of the new ministry to put in place structures that will be able to respond to emergency situations, crisis situations that where the nation is bedeviled with. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Claire Moluwole. Chuks Akamado, let's have your response to this.
Yes, I would want to differ a bit. I want to differ to the extent that I don't think it's entirely correct to say agencies like NEMA haven't been doing well. I think why Mr. President thought it necessary to bring this ministry on stream is to enhance efficiency. Of course, there are gaps here and there. With the coming of this ministry, the expectation now is that, okay, it would sit back, go from one relevant agency to another in search of data. When she harvests this data, the ministry needs to spend quality time in the policy laboratory. Look at them, evaluate them, and now think of how to fill the existing gaps here and there. That way, all the stakeholders within the disaster management environment will see themselves as partners in progress. Because really, this very destructive territorial war, it's not necessary. My thinking is that whether you are an agency of government or a department or a ministry that has something to do with disaster management or humanitarian affairs, that you will understand to be part of the president's next level agenda team. If you're part of that next level agenda team, then it behoves you to ensure that you play a collaborative role. There is no point going into unnecessary territorial war at all. So my expectation really is that the ministry should go about coordinating the activities of these relevant agencies in a most enlightened manner. And then these agencies should, in turn, give the ministry the requisite support and cooperation so that at the end of the day, their individual agency mandates would be better realized. Then the ministry would have also fulfilled its purpose. And who would be the better off for it? The average Nigerian. And all of us will be winners.
We're talking about the value system of this country. Some people say it has been bastardized. The youths of this country no longer feel as if this country belongs to them. How can this ministry key into the social, development responsibility of the ministry to ensure that our youths are up to par with their responsibility towards the nation too?
Well, I think the ministry should back on aggressive campaign for ethical rebirth. Okay. Ethical rebirth. We need a moral rearmament within the Nigerian youth population. We also need to really get them to begin to think Nigerian the more. Well, there is this them and us dichotomy. We need to break that wall of dichotomy. We need to let the youth realize that they too have a role to play. It is not true that it's just the old generation that has failed the youth. The youth on their part too, they also have their own issues. So that way, there will be an understanding that, oh, this blame has to be shared. It's shared blame. And when we understand that, oh, this blame has to be shared, nobody will now find the moral right to point accusing finger at each other or at one another. That way, you now begin to work more at how you can improve yourself and be a better citizen and see what you can contribute to national unity, national stability, and then the general progress of the nation.
All right, thank you. Reverend Father Obiezo, I would like you to also respond to what is the obvious gap in terms of adequate and timely reaction to disaster and crisis in the country.
Again, I also want to chime in with the fact that the existing agencies are doing work that have been assigned to them in terms of executing their mandates. Also, the fact of this ministry, as I said at the beginning, is not either to stifle their progress, but to enhance capacity and production, so that at the end, as Barrister said, it is a win-win thing for the whole Nigeria issue. Now, a timely response, our colleague here said, to respond to timely response is also going to be discussed beyond just the mandate of providing the response. The logistics have to come in place, and we cannot downsize the reality or overemphasize the fact that when structures that are supposed to facilitate timely response are not in place, you will always have a hitch in delivering. For instance, you mentioned either truckload or plane loads of facilities. You also mentioned about awarding contract when the emergency is there. In some places, there are those identified organizations or firms that are doing such things. So they are preemptive in producing things like that. And then how could you imagine that in a situation like ours, where there are so many things, either in energy, that will not facilitate a firm to be able to produce on time, or as I said, using transportation as one of those things. Would this ministry go into repairing roads, getting more planes, getting energy done? It can't do that. But if it will also help, this is where I think collaboration among ministries will work. Yeah. When she comes to the meeting of the Federal Executive Council to say, come, I was not able to respond to this particular issue because it took us so amount of time to reach Maiduguri or to reach to Osun because of bad road. So, Minister of Works, is there any way we could speed up this? So they could now share from each other what is it that you are experiencing that is hindering your own job to do yours. So I see that is the way she can actually help in that dimension. But I want to come into one other thing that the barrister says, how the ethical issue, as well as how do we build the...
Yeah, unfortunately, we're getting pressed for time.
Yes.
Because by the time you get into the realm of ethical rebirth and
I'm not going to go deep into that.
You just might be bringing the National Orientation Agency, which is under the Ministry of Information and Culture. But just still on this issue of getting timely, adequate, and effective response to disasters and humanitarian crisis, Dr. Hamisu, one point. We have seen in the Northeast an explosion in the number of NGOs, such that humanitarian response has now become a business and therefore almost counterproductive. So how might this new ministry help, to reorder things with regard to humanitarian crisis response in the Northeast? That's one. And secondly, we often hear that when disaster is looming, persons who are in the path of disaster will be urged to relocate. Where are they relocating to? When you see floods, or other disasters in advanced countries, or people have received warnings, they are either moved to public buildings, schools, and then you have emergency supplies of bedding, mattresses, blankets, and so on and so forth. Here you are telling them to relocate to nowhere, to relocate to become IDPs, and that's why some of them resist. So how can we avoid this situation that has lingered on for so long a time? How can we get companies to provide, to produce, and then get the appropriate agencies to warehouse tents or materials that they can use for tents that can be temporary shelters?
Well, you see, I don't believe that these problems are not surmountable because others are doing it. And I don't want us to believe, it's just like when you're talking about technology, they will tell you Nigeria is not yet ripe. When will we be ripe? Now, for instance, in UN system, what they do is to pre-qualify vendors, service providers, ahead of time. And once there is any problem, they can request you to supply ABC, depending when they do the processes of payment and the rest. Because they already have determined prices, everything is set and is ready. So once there is any crisis situation, they just say, company A, can you supply us this because you are already in agreement with us while we process your paper. So if we work that way, that is going to assist us. Secondly, the roads are bad, the infrastructures are not fine. There is no doubt about it. But what can we do? For instance, when we're to take decision to lift the refugees, and the commercial airliners were contacted. By the time the bill came, she said, no, it's too outrageous. She approached Air Force, and Air Force provided aircraft. So can there be partnership in that direction to say that as we go on, we want our response time to be effective and impactful so that we can always leverage on that? That is one. Secondly, NEMA has asset, though there are challenges with their registration. So can the new ministry facilitate the fixing of those very particular issues so that NEMA can be effectively ready for response delivery? That, we have 2 corridors now of air benefit to lift whatever consignment that we have. The third one is our attitude to crisis management, especially this disaster management, is very poor. I'm seeing what I would choose to call deliberate attempt to use this crisis to siphon money from government. For instance, if for 20, 30 years, this place was known as a waterway, our grandfathers never built on those places. No. Then we are saying that we are a knowledgeable society today because we are enlightened. And the same regulatory ministries gave people CFO to build on those very particular waterways. And so every year there is flood. You ask them to relocate, nowhere to relocate to. Why can't government relocate those people to a permanent place, spending, for instance, say 10 billion to relocate them, and saving us 50 years of having to use 10 billion to support them when flood arises? So these are the kind of problem-solving disposition and focus that I'm expecting this very particular ministry to bring to bear on the issues around disaster management in this country.
Thank you so much. I'm sure the minister is watching and listening. Thank you so much, Dr. Abdurrahman Abu Hamisu, researcher and public affairs analyst. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Insightful discussion. Mr. Chus Akamadu, President, National Alliance Against Drug Abuse. It's been a pleasure having you. And Clem Olawole, Managing Editor, columnist, and editorialist with Blueprint newspaper. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you very much.
And Reverend Father Emeka Chris Obeazu, OSA Migration Governance Expert and Coordination, Augustine Center for Peace, Advocacy and Justice. It's been a pleasure having you on the program.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much. We now go to our sports desk for sports update.